Hello, dearies. I'm so glad to be joining you again. I'm Menopause Barbie, your Menopause Tailor, and you've tuned in to one of the 4 videos in the Neglect series. As you know, I cover everything in units, and in between the big, hefty medical units, I usually address some more familiar topics. And even though menopause itself should be a familiar topic, it's not. In fact, even though 1/2 of the world's entire population will spend 1/2 of their entire lives in the state of menopause, the topic of menopause is the most neglected topic on planet Earth. So these 4 videos address this oddity. This is the 3rd video in the Neglect series, and its title is The Tree of Menopause. Now, I know that probably sounds a bit ridiculous, but you know me, I'll make sense of it for you. And even if you're thinking about skipping this video, please don't. Despite the goofy name, I think it will help you see the real essence of menopause. You see this tree? It has one great big trunk down here, 3 really big branches, and a whole lot of other smaller branches. Even the small branches have branches. So this tree consists of one big structure, the trunk, that forms the basis for a whole lot of other structures, the branches. And I'm using this tree today because it's an excellent representation of menopause. So let's address the various parts of this tree to see how they serve as a representation of menopause. Of course, there are many different kinds of trees, but they all follow the same principle of big trunks that sprout smaller branches. And that's the key to our discussion today. The largest and most obvious part of this tree is the trunk. The trunk is isolated, visible, and growing right out of the ground. I mean, it's difficult to miss. It really gets your attention, right? In fact, because it's at ground level, you have to walk around it, work around it, and build around it. That trunk makes a statement. Without it, none of the branches would exist. Now, these branches vary a bit. Some are larger than others. Some have lots of sub-branches, while others have only a few. At this point, you're probably wondering how in the world this tree can possibly represent anything pertaining to menopause. Well, this tree is a good representation of menopause because menopause is, by definition, the loss of your estrogen. And the loss of estrogen leads to a whole lot of other things, just as the tree trunk leads to a whole lot of other branches. So the trunk of this tree represents estrogen loss. It's the big, obvious, attention-getting part of the tree. The branches are all the things that occur as a result of estrogen loss, and they stem from estrogen loss. And they include all the diseases and all the symptoms that occur as a consequence of estrogen loss. As I've taught you in many videos, especially the estrogen window videos, that was a series from video 80 to video 90. The 3 big, long-term, significant consequences of estrogen loss are heart attack, osteoporosis, and Alzheimer's disease. They all result directly from loss of estrogen at the time of post-menopause. So these 3 big branches represent those 3 big diseases. And you've also learned that, contrary to what most women know about menopause, there are actually upwards of 22 symptoms of menopause. So, the smaller branches represent all those symptoms. Some of the symptoms of menopause are things that most women would never even associate with menopause. In that case, it would be like focusing on a single branch, failing to realize that it's a part of the same tree. And the branch is a symptom that is caused by estrogen loss. So what are all those symptoms again? Here's that list I showed you way back in video number 11. Absent periods, hot flashes, night sweats, insomnia, forgetfulness, fatigue, mood swings, irritability, depression, cravings, breast pain, joint pain, dry skin, hair loss, whiskers, vaginal dryness, urinary tract infections, incontinence, weight gain, low libido, acne, headaches. Do you see how vast and varied those symptoms are? They include things that occur from your head to your toes, and they encompass things that have nothing to do with your reproductive tract. They are things that you could attribute to a lot of other causes. In other words, they are branches that could belong to just any old tree. But alas, they are all due to just one thing: estrogen loss. In other words, they all stem from the tree trunk of estrogen loss. Now, if you wanted to nurture and care for this tree, what would you do? I'll give you some choices. You could pour water on each branch individually, or you could water the trunk. Which of the two options would produce the best results in terms of nurturing the tree? Of course, there are roots underground that you can't see, and they have a purpose too. They sustain both the tree trunk and the tree branches. They form the basis of the entire tree. You could say that they are at the very root of the problem. That's right, roots at the root of a problem. So in using our tree as an analogy for menopause, those roots would be represented by your endocrine system and vascular system, because they are the two things that distribute hormones to all parts of your body. So by watering the tree at its trunk, the water seeps into the ground, gets taken up by the roots, and then gets distributed to all parts of the tree to keep it vital and healthy. Likewise, if you wanted to nourish the tree of menopause, you would replace estrogen at the level of the trunk, and it would get taken up by your bloodstream to get distributed to all parts of your body. And if estrogen did get distributed to all parts of your body, all your symptoms would disappear. Not only that, your risks for those three big diseases, heart attack, osteoporosis, and Alzheimer's, would stay low too. But what would happen if instead of watering the tree of menopause with estrogen to replace the estrogen loss that comprises the trunk, you tended to each branch individually, or you just hacked at the leaves? Do you think you'd get the same result? Of course not. Instead of correcting what was at the root of the problem, you'd be addressing merely a manifestation of the problem. For example, if depression is one of your symptoms of menopause, and the only reason you suffer from depression is estrogen loss, would taking an antidepressant correct the problem as well as replacing estrogen? No. Or if you have vaginal dryness due entirely to estrogen loss, do you think that using lubricants instead of replacing the estrogen loss will correct the problem? Of course not. You might get a little relief, but you will not have corrected what's at the root of the problem. Well, this tendency to focus on each branch individually rather than focus on the obvious trunk of estrogen loss is precisely what is happening with menopause management these days. Instead of addressing the actual cause of all 22 symptoms and all 3 big diseases, both women and their doctors are focusing on the individual symptoms and largely ignoring the diseases altogether. Is that how you want to care for your menopause tree? Now, when I pose a question like that, I do not do so for purposes of coercing you to manage your menopause one way or another. This education is all about managing your menopause your way. I will help you and support you in managing yours any way you want. My goal is to make sure you realize what's at the root of the problem. There are many different ways to care for trees, just as there are many different ways to manage menopause. There isn't a right way and a wrong way. There isn't one way that is best for all women. No 2 trees are alike, and no 2 women are alike. But regardless of how you manage your menopause, understanding what's causing your problems is critical. And even though you notice the symptoms as independent branches, the actual problem is that the trunk is missing its estrogen. So use that knowledge in recognizing that all the branches or symptoms stem from the same thing. Now, you may view this in either a positive light or a negative light. You may be glad that the whole list of 22 symptoms are all due to just one thing, which is estrogen loss. For you, the fact that you can solve all of them with just one solution may be a positive thing. That would be akin to appreciating the entire tree more than just one part of the tree and being glad that you only have to water the trunk. Alternatively, you may not like the fact that the whole list of 22 symptoms are due to just one thing, which is estrogen loss. For you, the idea of treating symptoms that seem unrelated to a sex hormone with a sex hormone may be a negative thing. That would be akin to preferring to care for each branch individually. It might entail finding the individual branches that are in need of different kinds of care. Regardless of your preferences, the key is to have the knowledge that your menopause is like the whole tree. Otherwise, you'll fall prey to not being able to see the tree trunk for the branches. It's like that quote, where you can't see the forest for the trees. But in this case, we are focusing on just one tree. So it makes more sense to say, you can't see the tree trunk for the branches. Okay, so now you can think about menopause with all its various ramifications and consequences as one big tree. How you tend to your tree is your prerogative. And that's where I'll end today. Be sure to come back in a week when I'll conclude this neglect series. In the meantime, you can go to menopausetailor.me anytime to schedule consultations. You can and should subscribe to this channel. And you can follow me on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Until next week, bye!